There's a quote about how an object built by an individual is as much an expression of the builder's genetic phenotype as the builder himself.
Ghost in the Shell 2: Innocence. The first movie, based on the manga by Shinro Masamune and was released back in 1995, is regarded by many as a masterpiece in Japanese animation. Beloved for its thought-provoking story, awe-inspiring visuals, intense action, and atmospheric score, the film is a game-changer to not just the medium of animation and the genre of sci-fi, but also to the art of cinema in general. Not many animated films have the power to influence some of the biggest names in Hollywood like James Cameron, the Wachowski sisters, and Steven Spielberg. But of course, that's not what we're here to talk about. What we will be looking into is the lesser-known 2004 sequel, a film that director and writer Mamoru Oshii gave himself a challenge to see how much further he could take both the Ghost in the Shell universe and his filmmaking skills. Sure, it may not have reached the same level of fame as its predecessor, but it is noted to be the first and so far only Japanese animated feature to compete for the Palme d'Or at the Cannes Film Festival. Yes, I know that bringing back Ghost in the Shell and pulling off that identical excellence is extremely challenging. Even Hollywood tried that and tremendously failed. But since the movie had the same director and the same animation studio as the first, it does have a chance to be the next Ghost in the Shell in more ways than just being the follow-up. So now that we're going back to the cybernetic future, does Innocence keep the ghost of the first movie alive? Or is it just a shell of its former self? Let's find out. The story. At first, the movie sounds like the typical sci-fi crime drama, where Batou and Togusa investigate the big problem of sex robots killing their owners, and gradually discover what is it that's causing them to go haywire. Of course, as it is Ghost in the Shell, there is so much more to this film that makes this easily stand out from all the other sci-fi action flicks thanks to its complex mindset. However, in the case of Innocence, this asset is also its own setback. Now, I'll confess that I have seen this movie before. I remember when I watched this the first time many years ago, and I felt that there was one thing that held it back from having the same standards as its predecessor. You see, there are times in the film when it wants to be philosophical to show that it's smart. The problem with that is the philosophies are way too smart for anyone to understand unless you have a master's in that thing, and there are way too many of them, which causes the story to be way too complicated to follow. And after seeing this with a fresh perspective, I honestly have to agree with my past self. Yes, this is an attribute that is also found in the first Ghost in the Shell, as it takes its time to philosophically reflect upon our own individuality and discuss about life itself in a way that is understandable to follow. This has always been one of the most admirable traits of the film, and the second wants to double down on that philosophy aspect, taking as many opportunities as it can to have the characters deliver intellectual quotes and metaphors.
The way it calls up quotes at the drop of a hat, maybe the phenotype of your external memory device has some of your philosophical leanings.
Yeah, like you're one to talk, Plato.
And yet, it tries so hard to be philosophical that it prioritized it above all else, including the storytelling. It ends up being lost in its own ideas where it makes the pacing feel slow. If you're coming in expecting some cybernetic action, you may end up feeling disappointed with how the majority is explanations and academic banter. Yes, there are a handful of action scenes, and they are awesome when they show up, but they're not enough to make this consistently engaging and have you invested to see Batou solve the Locus Solus mystery. It's kind of like watching a real police investigation unfurl, where it's far less exciting than how other movies portray them.
I want you to give me your word, though.
We're just gonna talk. I'll avoid shooting as much as possible. You happy now?
Yes, I am.
Then let's go do this.
But the real problem with its philosophical side is that it makes the movie hard to follow. Maybe there is a chance that it's because me big dum-dum, But many of the philosophies that Innocence expresses are too complicated for me to understand, or I need more time than it offers me to comprehend what they were talking about. If I could guess what it's trying to say overall, I think the feature's message is about what can be considered alive. As it is set in a world where cybernetic enhancements are so commonplace that most people have become cyborgs, the line between the life of an organic being, a machine, or even a doll being played with is becoming blurred. A fascinating idea to discuss that stays true to what this franchise is about, but they should have been more direct with what they're saying.
Let a man walk alone. Let him commit no sin. Let him have few wishes. Like an elephant in the forest.
Okay, that's nice, but I'm not here for elephants. I want to see cyborg cops fighting crime. I don't understand how this elephant is relevant to this element.
I have no idea what you're talking about.
However, there could have been a way to make this all work. If it spent less time speaking in metaphors and put more focus on the plot with what's wrong with the robots and Bateau's life without the Major, then this would have been a worthy successor to Ghost in the Shell. But if discussing ideologies is so important to the film, then it should have done a better job to also make it clear to why they are relevant to the story. There was one scene that it actually did so, where the two were investigating a hacker named Kim and straightforwardly explained how they were able to escape his tricks. That was honestly the only time where I was impressed by its cleverness.
Are you telling me that someone breached the barrier I set up? Impossible! No one could pull that off!
Weren't you listening? I said I have a guardian angel.
And yet, I still felt mostly detached from this movie during my experience. It spends most of its time showing off its philosophy knowledge that I'm trying more to understand what they mean instead of following the plot. I understand wanting to look smart, and it is a great attribute for a feature to have to give itself some meaningful substance. Unfortunately, the way the movie executes this not only spoils the film, but makes it next to impossible to understand the whole feature in just one sitting. Even I had to do some extra research just so I could comprehend what was going on for this review. In a way, Innocence is so caught up with its own brain power that it forgets that it's a movie and acts more like a complicated philosophy class. The animation. The visuals of the first film were already an admirable achievement that can be considered some of the greatest animation from Japan. However, much like its cybernetic world, technology significantly grew over time, and the company producing the feature, Production IG, enlisted the help of several other studios to bring their updated vision of Ghost in the Shell to life, including Polygon Pictures for the CG, and Studio Ghibli with one of the founders, Toshio Suzuki, being one of the producers. While I may have some difficulty understanding the dialogue, I do know that this is still a great-looking picture. Much like the style of the first, the design's top priority is realism. While it may have some of the sensibilities of the typical anime, the animation team aimed to have the characters and the environment around them look as real as possible. Almost like doing rotoscoping without actually doing rotoscoping. Even their movements are meant to capture the organic genuineness of real people, mostly going for subtlety to convey their emotions. Yet there can also be times when things can get more dynamic, and the flow of their movements can be so smooth that it feels pretty satisfying to watch, especially when they do very well to enhance the moments of suspense and action with its strong sense of timing to have its viewers on edge. The movie even goes to that extra mile to swing around the camera for some more intricate shots and highlight how even the 2D elements here can have some 3-dimensional depth. Speaking of which, the biggest difference between the animation of the first and the second is the use of computer animation. And boy does Innocence love its CG! In fact, I consider this a mixed media type of animated film because there's debatably as much computer graphics in here as there is hand-drawn. Much like the film's philosophies, my thoughts on the CG are pretty complex. It's good, but not great at the same time. I'll say now that the work in the computer animation is well done as is. The details do great to both bring the machines to life and fit with the futuristic theming. Then again, this movie is from 2004, so there's no hiding that the technology that the animators use had their limits compared to today's capabilities. It's noticeable that it's outdated, but it still counts as good visuals. Yet another minor complaint that I have is that the CG doesn't mix well with the 2D components. Yes, it is rare when the 3D and the 2D are in the same screen, but while they share the same goal of capturing realism, there is a difference to their approach where they don't look like they belong in the same film. But then there is another component that plays a significant role in Ghost in the Shell, the environment. The world building that transports us to this cyberpunk universe where everything and everyone is enhanced with technology. Like its predecessor, I'll give it that it is undeniably impressive. The way that the city is massively detailed to give this sense of familiarity of a realistic metropolis, but evolved to accommodate the use of tech that is literally within the population. They also show how they use that same technology in order to keep their traditions alive. The electronics themselves may have some upgrades, but some areas make the tech adapt to their culture instead of letting their culture adapt to the tech.
If life's true nature is information that's passed down via genes, then society and civilization are nothing more than gigantic memory systems.
However, as cool as they may look, they do come with one issue. It's not necessarily the animation's fault, but more with the writing. Because the movie is so focused on discussing philosophy, the role that the world building plays becomes relatively minor. It's impressive at first, but as the picture tries to make you think about its intellectual idioms, the sci-fi elements end up blending with the background and its immersion slowly loses its power. The craftsmanship is admirable, but for a movie that wants to explain how everything can have a purpose, a lot of the visual work is just for style.
The inherent flaws in man's knowledge lead to flaws in man's reality.
Maybe a bit off more than it could chew with how it wanted to do more than the first with all of its details and CG. But that still doesn't change that the work that was done here is fantastic, and amongst everything that the film offers, the animation is the closest thing to recapture that same Ghost in the Shell experience. The characters. Well, at the very least, with all of its philosophy talk, maybe they could make the characters interesting. I mean, their knowledge on the subject shows that they can be smart, so that can hopefully translate into characters who know how to get audiences invested in the picture. That is how it should theoretically work, but that's not what actually happened. As consequence of its desperate need to be so thought-provoking, it not only forgets to make the storytelling engaging, but it also results in the characters themselves to offer little to the feature outside of what it knows about philosophy. If you take away all their idioms and metaphors, this is a generic cast of cop characters with little to offer that can be memorable. It doesn't even matter if you watch the sub or any of the dub versions, the writing itself is so convoluted that the people in the film don't leave much to think about compared to the stuff that they say. And again, the potential is there. There are aspects to the cast that sound like they may have some interesting backstories that could help expand the lore of Ghost in the Shell. But those parts are not among the film's priority and end up doing little to give their personalities a boost. A good case of what I'm talking about is with the main cop, Bateau. After the events of the first film, he's been trying to adapt to working with Public Security Section 9 without his longtime partner, Major Motoko Kusanagi. Back then, she was one of the team's best, and Bateau was always reliable as her backup. But now that she's gone, he has to carry his own weight and lead the way to make sure that the job gets done. However, even if she's not there to help, he can sense that the Major's ghost may still be around.
You've stepped inside the kill zone.
This is definitely a great idea to explore this aspect of him and a strong plot device as a Ghost in the Shell sequel. But sadly, this is only used to conveniently keep the plot going and to build up to fan service for the finale. For the most part, Bateau is the typical veteran cop who plays by his own rules and often upsets his boss for his recklessness.
You were ordered to conduct an investigation. I don't recall telling you to cut corners and take the law into your own hands.
Without the Major, his new partner he's assigned with is Togusa, the man with the least amount of cyber parts in him and the most unrealistic element of the movie. Sounds weird to say, I know, but out of everything featured in this picture, there is no way I will believe that it is socially acceptable to have a mullet like that in 2032. I get not wanting to turn into a cyborg, but I'm just saying, you don't need cybernetic enhancements to get a decent haircut.
You mustn't find fault with the mirror when it's your own face that's distorted.
The mirror does not reflect the truth. It only obscures it.
Anyways, Tokusa is like the straight man to Batou, the cop with less experience who's more concerned of trying not to die so that he could get back to his family.
It seems pretty obvious that I'm gonna need a few extra lives if I plan to survive on the job as your partner.
As for everyone else, it's honestly hard to say much about them. Even if there's a bunch that have their moments in the spotlight, they either just fill in the other police tropes or mainly deliver their own piece of philosophy. It's also worth noting that the sequel's biggest downgrade from the previous film is who is considered to be the villain here. It's not like in the first where we got an entity who is intimidating with the puppet master. In Innocence, the bad guy behind all the murderous robots boils down to just an evil corporation with no personality calling the shots.
所有機體已啟動中，無法跟系統進行連線。對抗戰鬥工程人造機體嘅防禦系統正在安裝中。
If there is one thing I learned from watching this movie, just because you know a lot of philosophical metaphors and you can make yourself sound smart, that doesn't make you an interesting person that we must listen to. And in the case of these characters, they may talk like they know what they're saying, but they don't have the same knowledge on how to be memorable like they did in the first. If this movie wants to play the philosophy game, then fine, let's play. How about this quote from Plato? Excellence is not a gift, but a skill that takes practice. We do not act rightly because we are excellent. In fact, we achieve excellence by acting rightly. So as much as this may act like the original, that doesn't mean that it is as excellent as the original. Ghost in the Shell 2 Innocence has all the necessary materials to create a worthy successor to the first feature, but lost focus on what made it the cinematic masterpiece we know today. As it tries to elevate the elements of the first by being more philosophical and present the visuals as high-tech, it ends up losing itself and leave the movie to be just another generic crime drama with a sci-fi theme. I wouldn't go as far and say that this is a bad movie at all. The animation is still great, the few action scenes they have are awesome to watch, and there are some interesting ideas that help expand the Ghost in the Shell universe. But it's hard to get into what the screenplay delivers when the pacing can feel insipidly slow and have academic dialogue where around half of it is incomprehensible to most people. Unless you have some kind of philosophy degree that allows you to quickly follow these discussions, I recommend to just sticking with the original. Fans of Ghost in the Shell can check it out to increase their experience with the franchise, but don't expect this to be on par with the 1995 film. By the way, if you enjoyed your time with this review, then how about giving this a like and subscribe to my channel? I promise that my videos are much easier to understand than this movie. Maybe this film is too smart for me, or maybe it's trying too hard to sound smart. Either way, after going through that experience, I'm gonna need a brain break. Hey guys, this is Animad, and I just want to go and say this right now that I completely understand if this may be a case where this is just me. because I know that this movie also has a prominent fan base, and there are some people who love Ghost in the Shell 2 Innocence as much as the first film. Because this definitely is a case where if you actually do understand the philosophical talk that these characters would go and discuss in the film, then there is a very good chance that you will enjoy this way more than I did. Because for me, honestly, as someone who doesn't necessarily explore in the realms of philosophy, someone who never really took a philosophy class in university and stuff like that, honestly, I felt like half of the time I was just lost, and it was kind of difficult for me to go and follow whenever they would have these philosophical talks, and I would try to comprehend what the heck is going on. But then I would also notice that the philosophies and all those discussions are kind of distracting from actually doing some of the important stuff in the film, like the storytelling. And I would even say that somehow, even in its placement in the timeline, it's just so confusing, where apparently it is said that Innocence is considered an official non-canon sequel to Ghost in the Shell, despite the fact that it has the same director, the same production team, and all that kind of stuff. I mean by non-canon where, like, it's not officially as canon as how the story would continue in the manga and stuff like that. So honestly, even in terms of its placement in the Ghost of the Shell universe, it's just so complicated. All right, but anyways, now that we are officially done with that, it is now time that we shall go and move on to a Patreon request. And this time around, we will be looking into a request made by Michael Nally. So I would like to start off by saying that if you would like to be like Michael and you want to go and support my work and get some amazing rewards at the same time, including but not limited to watching my videos before anyone else, then all you have to do is go to patreon.com/animat. But at the same time, if you would like to suggest an animated film you would like me to review and that I would put onto the animation hat, then all you have to do is write me an email at animatsreviews@gmail.com. All right, so with that said, what is it that Michael suggested to me? Is it actually going to be a movie I will comprehend more than Ghost in the Shell 2 Innocence? Well, thankfully, yes, it definitely is. And this is something that I'm actually very, very familiar with. This is actually something that not only have I played the card games, not only have I watched the original series, and not only have I seen this movie multiple times in theaters, the only thing that remains left for me to do is to go and actually make a full review of it. Now, I haven't done that before, but that's going to change for next time.
I'm leaving.